My name is Aidan Austin. I'm giving you guys a presentation on memory just to help you guys out. Before I begin, let me ask you a quick question. Has a grandparent or a mom and dad ever called you a sister or brother's name by accident? They're hoping to call you out and they call somebody else's name? That's called retrieval failure, which I'll get into more detail later on in this presentation. Now, the memory model is pretty simple. If you think about it, there is the three types of memory: the sensory memory, the short-term memory, and the long-term memory. Now, sensory memory only carries, it carries a lot, but it only lasts a few seconds because it's not actively grabbing your attention. Your brain isn't perceiving it, and it usually ends up decaying. But if it grabs your attention, it becomes short-term memory, which tends to hold about 7 bits of information, plus or minus 2, so 5, 7, or 9 usually. Now, fun fact, this is why when cell phones were first being created, the cell phone number was only 7 digits because the brain processes 7 digits. Now, things in your short-term memory, over time, if you don't actively encode it into long-term, things will start to decay. So it's important to encode because otherwise you will forget things and never be able to remember them. But repeating will help you remember things in short term. You encode into long-term memory. So scientifically, there has not been a proven limit to long-term memory. Studies are actively going on if it has a limit at all. But so far, all we know is that it could be endless. There is no limit to how much you can remember, so long as you know how. Now, long-term memory lasts as long as you let it. Over time, things will start to decay, and you won't remember it as often. If you retrieve that information back into short-term memory, as you're talking about it, you'll remember it more. It'll get more solid. When you're trying to retrieve, I mentioned this earlier, the retrieval failure may happen. As you went to retrieve that information, you grabbed from the wrong source. That's retrieval failure. It's a very common thing that happens to everybody. Now, I have a little activity for you guys. I'm going to give you a long list. I need you guys to put your pencils down. I'm only going to show this list for a few seconds. You need to remember as much as you can in this list. All right, down what you can remember. You think you did? Okay.
I wrote down CAT, ABC, XYZ, LOL, IDK, ASAP, OW.
Yep. So what you did right there is called grouping. You split it into CAT, ABC, XYZ, LOL, IDK, ASA, POW. Now if you pay attention, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That was 7 bits of data if you grouped it. Another important way to remember things is to attach it to a bit of yourself. Tricks for memory. I talked about chunking, which was splitting it into CAT, ABC, LOL, XYZ, etc. Another way is mnemonics. I'm pretty sure you all have heard of a mnemonic. Anyone know PEMDAS? That's a mnemonic. It's shortening a big bit of data into smaller chunks by separating it into the first letter of each of the words. Storying is another great way to remember. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. That's a story at that point, not just PEMDAS. Another thing was emotional pairing. A great one is repetition. But the more you repeat something, the more stable and solid it gets. It's like adding support to a house. That house is going to stand longer the more you support it. So there are 3 R's of memory: recall, recognize, and relearn. To recall information is to be able to know that you have the information. You're taking a test, you're able to recall from months ago when you were taught that information. Recognize. You need to be able to recognize that you understand what is in front of you. If you don't recognize that you know it, it's going to be a little harder. So recognizing that you understand the information is tell yourself, I know the answer to this, and it will make it easier to find that answer. And relearn. A big thing in at least the way that math is done around here is the integrated math, where you learn a little bit from the end of 9th grade. You go over some new things that you haven't learned the rest of the year. At the beginning of 10th grade, you go over that information. It's a lap. You learn information and you learn more, but you go over some of the stuff in the middle. That's relearning information. Now, it's not very often that one will memorize lists, because nowadays we usually don't. But if you wanted to, there are 3 things that you need to take into consideration. Well, 1 thing, 2 parts. The serial positioning effect is, it has 2 parts, the primary and recency. The primary effect is if you're given a list of 20 words, the first 4 words are going to be the most repeated in your head, therefore the easiest to remember. And as that list is being said and you're memorizing it in your brain, the last 4 are usually the ones that are remembered great, because they were the last ones to enter your short-term memory. So if you're going to memorize lists, take into consideration primary and recency serial positioning effects. So you remember the first 4 and the last 4, but the middle gets a little fuzzy. Now, things are remembered when they are repeated constantly. Like I said, the supports of the house. If you have a house and you have that structure, it's going to fall over, but you need to have the support needed, which is why repeating is a great and very important piece of memorization. Now, up here it says things are remembered when they are understood. That's a very basic way of saying it. If you understand something, you know it, but what that really means is things are understood when you learn to understand. If you go into a class and you don't know anything, that is the best, because then it's harder for you to learn, yes, but it makes it stronger. If you go into the class already knowing a lot, you're not going to learn as much. It's not going to stay put in your mind. So being able to recognize that this class is hard, that means that you're going to learn a lot more than the people around you. Might give you a little bit of an advantage. Things are remembered when they are paired with other things. So a common thing is when I say backpack, most people tend to think of a school student or school. But people take backpacks hiking or camping. Most people pair school to backpack or textbook. And so that's pairing to another thing. It's pairing something, one object to another, to remember them both. When things are connected to memories. So like I said, I connected ASA to my own name. I was able to remember it easier because I am that person. I know my initials. I'm going to stress this enough, but connecting to emotions. If you're feeling upset, you're going to remember whatever you hear in that conversation a lot more than if you're bored. If you're sitting there bored, oh, I don't understand this class. Oh, well, I'm going to take a nap. You're obviously not going to remember that class. But if you're excited, if you're engaged to learn, or if you're upset at the teacher even, you'll remember because you're upset. And that strong emotion is going to attach itself to the information you get, and you're going to be like, oh, that's stupid. But you remember it, don't you? Now, continuously retrieving things is important. I know I've repeated myself, but again, repetition is best. When you continuously retrieve information from long-term memory, it helps solidify it so it's easier to remember in the future. Now, I have a little task for you guys, okay? So I'm going to put up a timer for you guys, and you're going to get into pairs of 2, and each of you is going to take turns saying the ABCs as fast as you can. And your partner is going to look at the board, you're going to say that time, and you write that down on your piece of paper. We're going to do the same thing again, except you're going to count 1 to 26. You guys are going to do this again, except you're going to say A1, B2, C3. Let me state a fact. You did the ABCs really fast. You did the 1, 2, 3s decently. Most of you probably didn't even finish A1, B2, C3. This is multitasking. You're taking from 2 different pieces of information and putting them into one. This is why your brain cannot multitask. That's why that was so difficult.